Good evening, book lovers. Welcome to another episode of Cath-Lit Live. I am your host, Amy Cattapan. You can find me everywhere on social media under my pen name, AJ Cattapan. Good to be with you again tonight. There are lots of new books coming out in Catholic fiction and nonfiction. And so we're probably going to have 2 episodes here in October, and I got 2 episodes lined up already for November. So if you are looking for some new books to read, both Catholic fiction and nonfiction, everything from the young all the way up to, those of us who are more mature, some more adult books, feel free to keep following along, like and subscribe to see what else is coming up. Tonight, I'm bringing you a brand new author who's going to be talking about her very first book, a sci-fi novel called Markmaker. And this is from Mary Wood. She's a member of the Catholic Writers Guild. I got to see her this summer at our annual conference. I'll let Mary talk about her book, but first, let me tell you a bit about Mary herself. Mary Jessica Woods is a Byzantine Catholic writer and editor who was raised near Chicago, Illinois. She is a graduate of Wyoming Catholic College, and her writing has appeared in America Magazine, Catholic World Report, and First Things. She also serves on the editorial team for the literary magazine Dappled Things. In her mind, she spends most of her time on distant planets or alien spaceships, but she actually lives in rural Michigan. Please help me welcome to the show, Mary Jessica Woods. Hi, Mary. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Great to be here.
I'm so glad to have you here to talk about your debut novel. Very exciting. Just came out a week ago today, and the reviews are starting to roll in for you. So why don't you tell us about your debut novel, Markmaker?
Yes. So Markmaker is about this alien race called the Noxxiin. And basically their whole culture kind of revolves around these ceremonial tattoos that everyone gets kind of from the day of their birth, marking all their accomplishments or important life events. And so the story is about a tattoo artist in this alien society who he finds himself basically coerced into giving a mark of exile, of banishment, to a man that he knows is innocent. So then he's kind of faced with this moral dilemma of, he knows he's broken his oath of truth-telling, and he has to figure out what he's going to do about that.
Interesting. How did you get into writing science fiction?
That's kind of a fun little story in itself, because I mean, obviously this is my first book, but, did a lot of writing before publishing stuff. And for most of the time I was writing, I considered myself mostly a fantasy writer. And I really liked science fiction. I liked reading it and watching it. But I often found the world building was really intimidating. Because it's a lot of science fiction, it's very detailed with the technology and descriptions and stuff. So that always intimidated me just from a writing standpoint. But then when I was in college, I actually got involved with this role-playing game, like a tabletop role-playing game with a group of my friends. So one of my friends, the game master, had come up with this sci-fi world. It was really fun, and all these different races and conflicts and factions. And I really got into it and basically just started writing fan fiction in this world.
Based on the world he had come up with.
Yes. And one of the stories just kind of took off, sort of gained a life of its own. Yeah, so I really owe a lot to my friend. His name is Don and Scholl, who originally came up with the world. So we've kind of been creative collaborators through this whole thing. But yeah, so having a lot of the world building kind of there for me to play with was oh, I actually really like this.
Yeah, that
give me some
helps.
material and I'll hit the ground running. So
right, you've got the world created, you just have to make up the story that fits into that world.
Yeah. And obviously I've done a lot of world building as I wrote the story, sort of filling in the cracks and stuff. But yeah, I love the genre. I would say that my story is more on sort of the soft sci-fi end of the spectrum that's more focused on like characters and like societal conflicts rather than explaining all the technology. But it's still aliens on a spaceship, so it's sci-fi.
So exactly. Okay, so it is aliens on a spaceship. But how does this fit into Christian fiction or Catholic fiction? I mean, the alien's not Catholic, is he?
No.
Some people who follow me on social media know that a couple of weekends ago, I was actually on retreat with Brother Guy Consolmano, who's the director of the Vatican Observatory, who wrote a book, Would You Baptize an Extraterrestrial? But that's not what's happening in your book.
No. No, there is no sort of Christianity in the story in any recognizable form. So that is a good question, and it's a fun question. Yeah, so my aliens are not Christians. They've never heard of Christianity. They probably wouldn't convert even if they did hear of it. But
so is it
yeah, how is it Catholic?
How's that fit in?
So yeah, so I kind of like to work in, so even though it's, there's no like Catholics in the world, there's still very much a sort of Catholic underlying moral framework. I mean, the whole story is about truth versus falsehood and justice and injustice and like trying to atone for a sin, basically, that the main character believes he's committed. So there's very much sort of, I don't know, like the moral consciousness is there. I think, in the way that, many ancient pre-Christian cultures, and of course, people who aren't Christian today still have a conscience and an awareness, more or less, of natural law and what's right and wrong. And I think there's something really powerful about being able to tell like relatable stories in those worlds that are sort of more foreign to us, just to show like how universal these truths really are.
Absolutely. I mean, I think of like the classic sci-fi that I grew up with. I have 3 older brothers, right? And so like Star Trek, they were into Star Trek and Star Wars, and right. And there's no Christianity in any of that, but there are, you can see sometimes questions about what is fair, what is right. How do we behave when we encounter somebody who's different than we are? How do we get along with others? I think those are all common themes that tend to come up, don't you think?
Oh yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, what was something that maybe surprised you during the process of this? This is your debut novel, so did it all come out the way you expected?
No, there was a lot of work and much sweat and actual tears at points. I mean, you know this, I'm sure.
Yeah. Every writer cries at some point.
But yeah, something that kind of surprised me, in a way, the writing process for this book was a lot different than other projects that I've worked on in the past, primarily because I decided for various reasons when I first like got the idea for the story, that I was going to write it by hand, which is not something that I'd done. Like I hadn't written a story by hand since I was like 10 years old. But I'm a very, I self-edit a lot and I edit as I go. So I have, at least previous to this, to writing Markmaker, I have always had a really difficult time like writing a rough draft and letting it be rough. Because that delete button on the computer is just so tempting.
Yes.
But yeah, when I started writing Markmaker, I was really in a rut creatively before that. So just like, I've got this idea, I have no idea where it's going to go or if it's going to go anywhere. So I'm just going to pull out my notebook and pen and just write what comes to mind. And if it, if the prose isn't fancy or whatever, or if I can't think of the right exact word, like, no worries, I'll just keep writing and it'll be fine. And that opened up like crazy things happened. I wrote the whole first draft in 4 months.
That's pretty fast. Yeah.
I had never written a complete novel length story in that amount of time before. Now after, of course,
that act of writing by hand kind of freeing you up, right?
Yeah, a lot fewer of my normal inhibitions. It gave me sort of an ability to follow my intuition more easily, or to just experiment and see where things went. And if it didn't work, I could change it later, but a lot of times it did work. So yeah, I'll be trying that again for the next book. We'll see.
Excellent. Well, if people want to find out more about you and this book, and maybe to find out if there's another book, where can they find you online?
Yeah, so my website is just my name, maryjessicawoods.com. And I'm also on Facebook and Instagram with that same handle, Mary Jessica Woods. Yeah, and then my publisher is Chrism Press. You can find them and purchase the book at chrismpress.com.
Awesome. Very good. Well, thank you so much for coming on tonight, Mary.
Yeah, thank you. This was great.
All right. Well, all fans of sci-fi, go check out Mary's book, and we'll wave goodbye. Thanks, Mary. Really appreciate
it. Thank you.
All right. Well, I am grateful to Mary for coming on and talking about her new sci-fi book. I know a lot of people think like Catholic sci-fi, that's not a thing, but I think what's interesting with sci-fi novels is that they can often be either allegorical or just, sort of parable-like in nature. And I think if you're a fan of sci-fi, you should really go check out Mary's book, Markmaker from Chrism Press. And as always, if you're watching this on YouTube, please make sure to like and subscribe so you can get all of my future episodes coming up in your feed. Like I said, I have a number in the pipeline coming up. I'm going to be talking with Lisa Hendy. I'm going to be talking with Tony Kolink. Some of you have heard me talk about Tony's books in the past. He's one of my fellow middle grade YA authors. Got a few of his books here. Book 4 in the series is coming out, so we're going to talk with him. We're going to talk with Marge Fenelon about her new book. So we've got fiction and nonfiction stuff for kids and adults. Stay tuned. Until next time, I'm going to wish you all happy reading.